Happy 249th birthday to one of my favorite branches of the military, the United States Marine Corps. And today, in honor of the Marine Corps' birthday, I'm going to read a chapter from my memoir, Tainted Seas, My Sailor's Story, for the first time ever. And I hope you'll enjoy it. Happy birthday, Marines. I love you. And thank you for keeping my Navy family safe. All right, chapter 20, here we go. Chapter 20, Oorah, Oorah. Morning, doll, Bud said as he rolled over on his back and yawned. Go back to sleep, sweetheart, I said sleepily. I put my head on his shoulder and he wrapped his arms around me. I can't go back to sleep. He put his hands over both sides of his face. Don't worry, doll, I'll keep you safe, and the boys safe too. His hand stroked my hair. Closing my eyes, I leaned into his touch, but a voice popped into my mind, the crackling laugh of the man on the phone resonated in my head. I struggled to block it out, but it echoed in my ears. My eyes opened wide and my body stiffened. I've got you, doll, he whispered in my ear. Nothing will hurt you. He ran a hand slowly down my back and his other hand slipped upward towards my forehead and moved over my cheek, and he kissed me. I closed my eyes again. The voice was gone. Only Bud was with me. Gently, he calmed my rigid body and eased me to his touch. Melting together, we enjoyed a soothing, reassuring love, his muscular body blanketing mine, and together we escaped our nightmare, finally drifting back to sleep, wrapped in each other. The ringing folds startled us awake. Bud took the call. An hour is fine, he said. Hold that bastard as long as you can. There was a pause as Bud listened. Then he growled, Tom, I don't care if he has God as his attorney. Stall as long as you can. Charge the son of a bitch and keep him locked up. I relaxed as I heard the NIS director's name, but was stunned by the rage in Bud's voice. I'll have my report ready. I led the raid, I'll do the report. I want my name on the report that finally nails him. Bud listened, then mellowed. I know. See you in an hour. Thanks, Tom. Bud sprang out of bed, grabbed his briefcase, and sat at his makeshift desk. He announced, Doll, I need to write this report. Realizing he was naked, Bud stood up and pulled on running shorts, then sat down again. My feelings bounced around my head like the balls in a pinball machine. His determination to catch this man who terrorized our family, the man with the sardonic voice, was reassuring, but placing himself in harm's way chilled me. But I knew would get the guy whether I liked it or not. I nodded my approval or perhaps my understanding. He turned away and started writing. Sighing deeply, I headed to the bathroom for a shower. The coffee maker's churn filled the kitchen with the warm fragrance of the usual morning at the Hampel home. A fake illusion. That morning was unique, a one of a kind. Our house was zipped up tight. Drawn drapes, reinforced windows, locked doors kept others out, but also trapped us inside. I went to the living room and peered behind the drapes. A Marine stood guard over our home. In the distance, heavy gray cloud skies bearing South Carolina's spring thunderstorms marched across the sky. The neighbors' crocus tulip bulbs nudged their ways through the soil, and azaleas were heaving white-pink flowers of spring. A child's empty swing set blew back and forth in the wind. I shuddered at the thought that somewhere, both unknown and dangerous, lurked outside, someone watching us. Who was he? Our 5-year-old ran into the kitchen with his buddy dragging behind him, jumping up and down in excitement. Greg chirped, Mommy, Today Miss Parker's making puppets. We get to make a dog puppet or a cat puppet. Mine will be a puppy. All girls will be a boy puppy. Only girls like cats. He hugged his buddy. Mommy, can I get a puppy? Frankie got a puppy. Can I get a puppy? I'll take care of him. Take him for walks. Please, Mommy, can I please get a puppy? My brain whirled and everything Greg said vanished. Go to the potty. Be sure to flush the toilet and then wash your hands. I'll make you some eggs and bacon. I don't want eggs and bacon, he said firmly. I want oatmeal. Daddy always makes me oatmeal before school. Daddy needs to work this morning. Go to the potty and wash your hands. I refrained from giving him my mother's standard answer to the unappreciated meal, the one about the hungry children in China, then reached for the oatmeal box. What reason could I give for Greg missing school today? No idea. It was only one day. He could miss one day. Too bad, because he was so excited about making a puppet. I heard the toilet flush, but I didn't hear the sink faucet. Greg sprinted down the hall to his daddy. I poured Bud a mug of coffee and took it to our bedroom to rescue my husband. Arriving, I discovered that Bud didn't need saving. He bent over forward, his hands on his son's shoulders, and said, Tough guy, I have a ton of work to do, and Mommy's not feeling well. Can you stay home and take care of Mommy, please? Bud looked at me over his glasses and smiled. Greg's little chest puffed up. I'm a tough guy. I'll take care of Mommy. Bud hugged his little boy tightly, but Greg pushed away. Daddy, I must go make oatmeal. Don't worry, I've got this covered. I shook my head. Bud's words exactly. True to his promise, Greg took my hand and pulled me towards the kitchen. I shrugged, handed Bud his coffee, and followed my son. Passing Chris's room, we stopped and took him along. Greg pulled out the stovetop for the oatmeal, then stood at attention, ready for his next assignment. My oldest elderly ate his oatmeal, while Chris had most of his oatmeal smeared across his face. No sound came from the back room. I knew not to interrupt Bud in mission mode. He needed to finish that report. After cleaning up the kitchen, the boys and I retreated to the kids' bedrooms to get them dressed. Finally, we settled in Greg's room. I kneeled to the side of the white play table with Chris on my hip to help Greg put together a puzzle. Chris wiggled out and squirmed until he was free to explore the room. He gathered building blocks and sat contentedly stacking them in a neat pile. A thunderstorm clapped, and the ringing of the doorbell interrupted the play session. I heard Bud lope down the hallway to answer the door and stood in the doorway watching. Tom took off his soaked raincoat and hung it on the foyer tree, then followed Bud into the kitchen. I pulled Greg's bedroom door closed to keep the boys from hearing the conversation between Bud and his NIS boss. After about 20 minutes, Bud entered the room. He calmly said to the boys, I need to speak with Mommy for a minute. I rose and followed Bud out to the hall, and he gently closed the door behind us. Okay, if I go to work for a while or two, I want to question the drug dealer before his fancy lawyer gets to him on bail and gets him out on bail. The Marine will stay, and I promise to call as soon as I arrive at the office. Is that okay, doll? I shuddered at the thought of him leaving, but I nodded in approval. Like it or not, Bud couldn't solve this problem for our home. I followed him to the front door. When he left, I closed the door and locked it. During the boys' lunch, the phone rang. I answered the den phone expecting Bud's voice, but the school secretary called about Greg's absence. I apologized for not calling and then blurted out a true answer. We had an emergency. The phone rang again. It was my boss, and I repeated the same apology and excuse for my absence at work. I scolded myself for forgetting to call both of these places, my mind frazzled with worry. Then the phone rang once again. This must be Bud. He promised to call. Bud, you didn't call. The voice screeched, so your bastard husband thinks he can find out who I am. Fat chance. He broke into a laugh, that laugh that chilled every cell in my body. I needed to get the Marine's attention. I pulled the phone cord as far as I could and threw a slipper at the door, but missed my target. The voice still cackled. Quietly, I put the phone down and ran to the door. Signaling the Marine, I held up my hand as if holding a phone and pointed to the den. He raced inside the door and picked up the phone. The voice growled so loudly I could hear it. Your fucking husband thinks that the Marine will keep you safe. No fucking way. That Marine's eyes narrowed and the veins popped out in his neck. The voice continued. That Marine steps away to take a piss just once, and I'll be there. I'll get those boys of yours. The voice broke into his hideous laughter, and the Marine declared, This is Sergeant. Instantly, the phone line went dead. He turned to me. Ma'am, please take your boys into the room and close the door. I have a phone call to make. Don't worry, I won't leave. Get your boys out of earshot. Closed up in Greg's room, we waited. When I heard Bud's voice, I ducked gently out of Greg's room and ran down the hall. Bud helped me to the foyer. My body felt tense and rigid. As I rubbed his back, he relaxed slightly, but then a door slammed and every muscle tightened again. I needed to find out what was happening. He raced into the den as the men flooded in the front door. Like a rerun of a horror movie of the previous night, the events repeated themselves. People took over our home. Bud's voice echoed in my thoughts. Which one do you want, dog? He said this when both boys needed our attention at the same time. He took care of one son and I took care of the other. Likewise, we divided this situation. I headed back to our boys. I trusted he'd handle the problem in the den and I'd keep our children safe away from the fray. Our family now became the victims listed on a newly opened case. I was sure the case had a number, but unofficially it was referred to as The Voice. A new list appeared on Bud's refrigerator in neat block printing, outlined all the safety procedures we needed to follow. To me, it looked more like the procedure of a high-security prison, but he insisted we follow it to keep safe, and I agreed. The next day, we met a Marine who was assigned to take Gregory to kindergarten. His solid body filled out every seam of his uniform. Greg was so excited about meeting another tough guy like his dad, taking him to school. Today was the first day of kindergarten duty. Hello there, Greg, the Marine kneeled and said gently, I'm Sergeant Curtis Hilden, but you can call me Sergeant Curtis. Your dad says you're a tough guy and a big help to him. I'm going to take you to school today. His crew-cut and heavy-muscled body made him look scary, but Sergeant Curtis was gentle as a lamb with our son. Taking Greg's hand, he loaded our boy into the government car and took him to school. No doubt he would guard our boy at school. Our lives took a different twist. Chris and I stayed home. My work project became home-based. Thank goodness I was so ambitious with the collection of data. Our Marine guards rotated each day while Sergeant Curtis escorted and guarded our kindergartner. Each day, Bud went to work, but his duties were limited to the office. He grew increasingly frustrated with the lack of progress in identifying the voice. Every day, Bud came home with a searing headache. He popped extra strength Tylenol, and I imagined it eating the lining of his stomach. It had been 31 days since the last threatening phone call. Voice had gotten what he wanted. To protect his family, Bud had backed down. What choice did he have? Hey, doll, Bud's tired eyes winced from the bright sunlight and his shoulders drooped as he came through the door. I picked up your papers from the school. No problems. Your boss is pleased with them, and if you have more, I'll take them tomorrow. But your boss seems to think you're done. He's happy with it and plans to print up your work unless you have any additions. He wants you to call him tomorrow. But Bud, why don't you catch a few winks before dinner? No, I'm fine. Besides, if I sleep now, I won't sleep tonight, Bud said through a yawn. I shook my head. He wasn't sleeping much, and when it did, it was restless. And the less sleep he got, the more headaches loomed. He answered my silent question with nothing to nod and essentially nothing today. We needed to explain. No need to explain. The voice had not been identified. Doll, could you get me a glass of water? I have a headache. Out of his shirt came his ever-present pillbox. I stood, cocked my hips, ready to confront him about the pills when I was interrupted. Daddy, look what I got, Greg blurted out, running to Bud. Miss Parker put a star on it. Bud took the paper. Wow, great job. Let's hang it up. Other school papers were repositioned around the front of the refrigerator. And then Bud gave Greg the thumbs up with a big smile. After dinner, Bud stretched out on the sofa with his head on my lap. I stroked his hair. Chris rolled the pull toy around, but the wheels got stuck in the high shag pile, and the wooden duck tipped over. He picked it up and pulled it around again. His older brother sat on the floor coloring a picture of Superman. As I continued to stroke Bud's head, he drifted off to sleep. My family was safe. Suddenly, Bud snapped awake. He said, I'm Linda, he said. Bud called me by my real name, and it startled me. He rolled over to his side, to his back, composing something difficult to say. Linda, I've got bad news. Our investigation hit a block. All we know is the call came from New York City. I tried to get information, but the busted drug dealer and the fancy attorney, but I couldn't get anything out of them. The only thing he knew was only way we're going to be safe is to get out of Charleston. The Navy's going to transfer us to San Diego. I'm sorry, so sorry. I gasped, but my job. We have friends here in our home. I put a hand over my mouth. Doll, I know you love living here, but it's not safe. With the upcoming promotion, you can stay home with the boys, maybe have a baby. You'll love California, sunny and warm every day, and the beaches are beautiful. And I promise I'll get another home. After California, our next transfer could be Japan. You could buy authentic Japanese furniture for the living room. It's the best I can do, doll. I'm sorry, but I can't risk you and the boys. Wrapping my arms around my chest, I sat thinking. I scanned our beautiful home. A closed drapes, reinforced windows, zipped up house, and then our boys. We couldn't live in this locked up fortress forever, afraid to go anywhere and under constant Marine Guard. Tiffany Street was our first real home. But I couldn't risk my family for a house, no matter how much I loved it. You're right, we can't live in fear like this. Besides, I've never been across the country. Before I met you, the furthest I went from Pennsylvania was the Jersey Shore. It would be exciting to move cross country. Could we go to Japan? Yes, after California, I'd request transfer to Japan. It's easier to get transfer there from the West Coast than the East, he said with a tone of relief. Imagine shore duty in Japan. And Doll, you could get a job in California or stay home, have a baby or not, whatever you want. He cut my face and both of his hands, with both of his hands, and then asked, could you be happy in California? Tears of relief ran down my face. Confused, he asked, happy or sad? Happy tears. If I'm with you, I'm happy. I love you, Doll, he said as he pulled down my head and kissed me, but only a short kiss. Then stepped aside. His brain kicked into action. I'll make a planning list. Don't worry, Doll, I've got this covered. I laughed. You do that, sweetheart. I love you, Bud hampered. I smothered his face with kisses, feeling the tension roll off his body. The next morning, a new list appeared on the refrigerator, right in front. That day, I was going to the gynecologist. It was on Bud's list. Bud stayed home with our kids while Sergeant Curtis escorted me to the doctor's office. This brawny, unmarried Marine, who was almost a head shorter than me and nearly twice as wide, was taking me to the gynecologist. Sergeant Curtis squirmed awkwardly in his seat among all the pregnant women in the waiting room. When they called my name, he stood up to go into the examination room, but I stopped him and chuckled. I think I'll be safe, Sergeant. With my legs up in the stirrup, the doctor asked, your husband is a Marine? He didn't wait for an answer, but went on to the next question. When was your last period? 3 weeks ago. How long? 3 weeks ago, I answered. How long after an IUD is removed does it take to get pregnant? Usually 8 months or more, he said confidently. It takes time for the body to readjust. 8 months, over a year before we would have a healthy baby. Perfect timing, I thought. Quietly then I said, take the ID out, please. And doctor, could I have it? He gave me a strange look. I wanted for a gag gift for my husband, I explained. I left my stand-in Marine husband with a small box with my IUD. We rushed around ready for the move. So much to do in only 3 weeks. Finished my curriculum, writing, reassigning my job, organizing packing for a cross-country trip, a car checkup, and much more. It was all on Bud's list. He crossed off each item as it was completed. There was an advantage to being married to a left-brain man. One day, the day of the final move preparations, was packing. Sergeant Curtis and another Marine sat watching 3 elderly men package our household goods. The old packers looked apparently questionably and didn't question the Marines. Slowly they wrapped and boxed and taped our goods into brown boxes. They were slow, and I could see the impatience in the 2 Marines' faces as they stood watch. Meanwhile, Bud and I sorted out, organized our stuff for the cross-country trip. It was all crossed off Bud's list and neatly stacked on the bed for his last-minute inspection. Once passing inspection, we loaded all the suitcases and boxes. We labeled the boxes and inventoried the bags. There were suitcases, there were overnight bags, suitcases for when we arrived. It was all on his list. It was an excellent method, and I went along with the plan. Everything went well until that evening. All the excitement drew down from the day, and we were exhausted. After the boys were in bed, Bud sat cross-legged on the den floor. Bud, let's hit the sack, I said. I'm beat. He didn't move. His eyes stared blankly forward. I tried again. Bud, wake up. Still no answer. Beads of sweat rolled down his forehead, but otherwise nothing moved. Oh no, not now, I thought. My options rolled through my head. I could call for help and pretend it never happened, or pretend it never happened. If I called an ambulance, then what? We'd taken to the hospital, and then what? I knew he'd be angry if I spoiled his Navy career. And what about our safety? There was no way on the East Coast we were safe, not with the voice still threatening our family. It had been months since he blanked out like this. Maybe it would be a long time until it happened again. Or perhaps it would never happen again. That's how I thought back then, so Pollyanna, so young in my 20s. I decided we'd go to California. If it happened again, I'd call for help. If not, then it wouldn't matter. When he stirred and started to leave his trance, I helped him into bed and he fell instantly to sleep. Eventually, I did too. In the morning, Bud bounded joyfully out of bed, same as ever. As I dressed, his off-key singing drifted from the shower. The night before evaporated like a bad dream. But in our last several days of escape from the voice, everything seemed dreamlike. Morning, doll, he said as he whizzed by me with boxes stacked in his arms. I can't wait to get on the ship. Brand new, wow, and the latest technology. And doll, I'll have my own department, the weapons department. Imagine that. I pasted on a smile. Didn't Bud remember last night? Apparently not. In my mind, I again questioned if the blackout episode even happened, or maybe it was just his way of dealing with exhaustion. Was his perky rebound an act to keep the Navy from kicking him out? Or I didn't have a clue. If he didn't produce, he'd be out on his ass and the Navy would stick another man in his place. But that's how it was then. Another traitor to the man I loved and perhaps just plain stupid. He'd be fine. And then what? It would happen again. But I'd convinced myself it couldn't and wouldn't and shouldn't happen again. I put off the memory of the episode, pushing it to the back of my mind. Bud was himself again, springy ball of energy and determination. I had a happy husband and two small children. I pressed on as if blind optimism could change what I saw before my very eyes and viewed myself. But I'd get him to the doctor as soon as we settled into California. I'd insist he'd see a doctor. Carefully, Bud snapped the white box with the cupola into the roof rack. Again, he wrote my doll's cupola on the outside. Clipboard in hand, my husband made a second check mark for each item he loaded in the car. Next, nodding to the movers, next morning, the movers loaded our household goods into the crates, locked the crates, and then moved them out to the flatbed truck. After one last inspection of our Tiffany Street home, we loaded the boys in the car. As we drove away, I turned around for one last time to view our home, wondering what our neighbors must have thought about all the police cars, the Marine cars, and then our hasty departure. Our house sat empty with a for sale sign in the front yard, but my home sat right next to me in the driver's seat, and our two boys were in the back. Two Marines escorted us to the South Carolina state line. One of them was Sergeant Curtis. As we passed the Marines at the border, Greg pressed his face against the back window and waved. For the first time, I saw that burly Marine sergeant smile as he waved back. The two boys and I had come to love him like family. But we never saw him again. We were off to in our station wagon to California. With each mile marked off by the odometer, we left the danger behind us, and our stress gradually vanished. We laughed and sang along the roads as we headed west. We were off on a new adventure. At our first stop, Bud unloaded some of our overnight bags, then returned to the car. He brought in the special white box labeled "My Doll's Cupola." I smiled and kissed him on his cheek. Chris's face was full of his last snack, so I rummaged in my bag for hand wipes. Pulling out each item after them, I came across the small white box with my used IUD. I counted the days. I was late, only 4 or 5 weeks late, but nevertheless, I was late. No, I couldn't be, or could I? The boys settled into one double bed. Bud crawled into and I crawled into the other. Cuddling close, he announced, "Doll, tomorrow I'll be a full lieutenant. My promotion takes effect tomorrow." "Oh, I'm sorry, Bud, I should have gotten you something," I said. Then thought for a second and said, "Lieutenant Hampel, I do have a gift for you. Wait here." As he opened the white box, Bud looked baffled. He picked up the small T-shaped item and spun it around. A short string at the bottom and the T-shape swung along with the movement. "I give up, doll." "What is this?" he said as he warily returned it to the box. I smiled sweetly and said, "It's my IUD. Happy Father's Day, Lieutenant Hampel." "Are you pregnant, doll?" he asked as his face broke out into a huge smile. "Really? Are you pregnant?" Wow! His hands went to my stomach and he gently moved in a circle. With a confident look on his face, he whispered, "Hello, my sweet little doll." "Well, I'm late, but only maybe 20, 25 days late, maybe more. In all the confusion, I lost count. The doctor said it takes at least 8 months after the IUD is removed to get pregnant. I can't be pregnant, but I knew it. I remembered how the previous IUD had expired. And bang, I was pregnant. Bud and I were baby-making machines. He glanced at his sleeping boys, and his brows waggled suggestively. A glint came into his eyes. If you're not pregnant, let's see if I can fix that." Well, happy birthday, Marines. You can see that the Marines are a great part of my story, the true story, my memoir, Tainted Seas, my sailor story. To me, the Marine Corps and the Marines in the Marine Corps are my heroes. Thank you, Marines. Happy 249th anniversary to the Marine Corps. This is Linda Jo Heffner, the author of Tainted Seas, my sailor story, lindajoheffner.com. Signing out for now. Happy birthday to my special, special Marines.